The slap echoed through Mason's diner like a gunshot. Michael Harrington sat perfectly still, blood trickling from his split lip, his wedding ring catching the morning light as he slowly raised his hand to his mouth. At 81, his face was a roadmap of years spent in shadows most Americans never knew existed. He didn't flinch, didn't fight back. Not yet. Instead, he touched his bloodied lip with weathered fingers that had once commanded the most lethal force on Earth. The Russian smirked. "Stay down, old man." But Michael smiled. Cold, quiet, terrible. Because under the table his hand had just pressed a button. And 20 miles away, his daughter's phone lit up with 2 words that made her blood run cold: Ghost Protocol. What the thug didn't know was that he'd just slapped a ghost. And ghosts don't die alone. Mason's diner smelled like bacon grease coffee and the particular sadness of people eating breakfast alone. Sunlight struggled through windows that hadn't been properly cleaned since the Reagan administration, casting pale squares across checkered linoleum that remembered better days. The jukebox in the corner, a relic from 1963, played Creedence Clearwater Revival's Fortunate Son, at a volume just loud enough to fill the empty spaces between conversations. Outside, the small Virginia town was waking slowly. A dog barked. Someone's truck wouldn't start. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The kind that made you forget the world could be a knife that cut without warning. Michael Harrington had been coming to Mason's diner every Tuesday morning for 15 years. Same booth by the window, same black coffee, same worn leather wallet with a photograph he couldn't bear to look at but couldn't stop carrying. His white hair was cut military short because old habits died hardest. His face bore the marks of a life lived in service, a scar across his forehead from shrapnel in Desert Storm, another along his jaw from a knife fight in Somalia. His eyes were the pale gray of a winter sky, sharp enough that most people looked away when he held their gaze too long. He wore Levi's jeans and a flannel shirt, unremarkable except for how he sat with his back to the wall, eyes on the door, cataloging every person who entered with the automatic assessment of someone who'd spent 40 years expecting trouble. The Rolex on his wrist was scratched and worn, a memento from his days in the Middle East. The wedding ring on his left hand was gold, worn thin in places. He touched it without realizing a gesture so habitual it had become part of his breathing. Eleanor. 15 years since the phone call at 2 a.m. 15 years since he'd stood in the rain watching them pull her car from the ravine. 15 years of knowing that brake lines didn't just fail on 3-year-old vehicles, but knowing and proving were different countries, and he'd been stuck at the border ever since. Martha Sullivan moved between tables with practiced efficiency. 68 years old, hair the color of steel wool, hands that shook slightly when she thought no one was looking. She'd buried her husband 12 years back, Navy SEAL like so many men in this town, and understood the specific silence that came with loss. She set Michael's coffee down without asking. "Morning, Michael." Her voice carried the rough warmth of someone who'd smoked for 30 years before quitting cold turkey. "Morning, Martha." Michael wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into knuckles that ached more with each passing winter. What most patrons of Mason's Diner didn't know was that Martha Sullivan wasn't just a widow who ran the best breakfast joint in 3 counties. The shotgun mounted beneath her counter wasn't for show, and the expert marksman certificate hidden in her office wasn't some novelty item bought at a county fair. Martha had been a combat nurse during the Gulf War. Before that, she'd worked for the National Security Agency monitoring Soviet communications. Her friendship with Michael went back decades, though neither of them discussed those years openly. Not here, not with civilian ears around. There had always been something unspoken between them, A connection deeper than friendship, but never acknowledged. Both of them carried too many ghosts to make room for anything else. The bell above the door chimed. Michael's eyes flicked up muscle memory from 40 years in the field. His body tensed imperceptibly. 4 men. Everything about them was wrong. They moved like soldiers, but without discipline. Weight forward, aggressive, scanning the room with the attention that came from expecting violence. The first one was built like a bull neck, thick as a tree trunk tattoo, creeping past his collar. Cyrillic lettering partially visible above a distinctive symbol Michael recognized immediately. Wagner Group. Russian mercenaries. Behind him, 3 more spread out with practiced choreography. They weren't here for the Tuesday morning special. Michael set his wallet down slowly, left it open to Eleanor's photograph. His hand drifted under the table, fingers finding the small device taped to the booth's underside. A panic button he'd installed 3 years ago linked directly to a secure network. To his daughter. It had seemed paranoid then. Eleanor always said his paranoia would outlive them both. Turned out, she was half right. The Russian walked straight toward Michael's table. Up close, Michael cataloged everything. Slavic features. Eyes like dirty ice. Scar through his left eyebrow. Leather jacket, despite the Virginia heat, which meant he was carrying. Probably a Glock. "Excuse me." The man stepped backward directly into Michael's path as he stood. Coffee sloshed drops hitting Michael's shirt. The man turned surprise on his face that might have been convincing to anyone who hadn't spent a lifetime reading deception. "Watch it, old man." Russian accent. The kind that came with a very specific skill set. The diner went quiet. Martha's hand drifted below the counter where she kept the Remington. Michael dabbed at the coffee with a napkin. Slow, controlled. "No harm done." His voice was level, almost pleasant. "I think there is harm." The Russian smiled. "You're in my seat." This wasn't about a seat. This was something else entirely. Michael's finger was already pressing the panic button. Ghost protocol. The emergency signal. He pressed twice, then stood. "I'll move." Too late. The Russian's hand moved. Suddenly, there was a gun. Glock 19 pointed at chest level just as Michael had suspected. The other 3 men shifted, blocking exits, hands moving to concealed weapons. Professional. Organized. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution with an audience. Michael's heart rate stayed steady, dropping into the calm that came from 40 years of knowing panic killed faster than bullets. He could see Martha going white. The old man at the counter starting to stand before his wife. Pulled him back. Innocent people who'd come for eggs, not to watch an old man die. The Russian leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Eagle's Talon sends their regards, and so does Colonel Donovan." The name hit Michael like a physical blow. James Donovan. 30 years of friendship, of saving each other's lives. James, his best man at the wedding. Catherine's godfather. James, who'd disappeared 3 years after Eleanor died, faked his own death in Mexico. Michael's face didn't change. 40 years of fieldwork had taught him control. But something must have shown, because the Russian smiled wider. "Ah, you remember. He wanted you to know who this was from before you died." The slap came fast, professional, designed for maximum impact and humiliation. Michael's head snapped sideways. He tasted copper blood, where his teeth cut his lip. The wedding ring caught morning light as he raised his hand slowly to his mouth, touched the split, looked at blood on his fingers. He didn't fight back. Didn't need to. Under the table, the signal had been sent. 20 miles south, his daughter's phone was lighting up. Ghost protocol. He looked at the Russian, at the three other men now openly displaying weapons, at Martha, frozen with her hand on the shotgun, at terrified civilians who'd become hostages in what should have been a peaceful Tuesday morning. He touched his bloody lip again, then smiled. Cold, quiet, terrible. "You boys," he said softly, "picked the wrong diner." The Russian's smile faltered just for a second. "Big talk for someone about to—" Michael kicked the table hard. The edge caught the Russian in the stomach, drove him backward. Coffee mugs exploded. Michael's hand flashed to his boot, came up with a knife. 7 inches of carbon steel that had saved his life more times than he could count. He shifted into combat stance, pure muscle memory blade, held low and ready. The Russian recovered, swung the Glock around. Michael closed the distance because inside arm's length, a gun became a liability. He grabbed the Russian's wrist, twisted with precision, born from thousands of hours of training. Felt bones grind. The Glock clattered to the floor. The knife came up, stopped a hair's breadth from the carotid artery. "Down," Michael said quietly, "or you bleed out in 90 seconds. The Russian went down, eyes wide, with sudden understanding that the old man wasn't just some random target. The other 3 had weapons raised, shouting in Russian, trying for a clear shot. Martha had the shotgun leveled, hands steady, despite her age. "All of you get down or I start shooting." Her voice was hard as iron. The man nearest the door opened fire, not at Michael, at the windows. Glass exploded inward. People screamed, "Dove," under tables. Michael released the Russian, kicked him hard in the ribs, then dove behind the counter as bullets punched holes in the coffee maker, the pie display, the vintage Coca-Cola sign. Martha was already returning fire with calm efficiency. She caught one shooter in the leg. Good hit. Non-lethal, but incapacitating. He went down screaming. 2 left, standing. Michael grabbed a cast-iron skillet and threw it with the accuracy of someone who'd once thrown grenades for a living. It caught the second shooter square in the face with a wet crunch. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The last man standing was the youngest, mid-30s, with the wild eyes of someone watching his plan fall apart. He had his weapon pointed at Michael, but his hands were shaking. "Drop it," Michael said. "You drop that weapon and walk out. You might live. You keep pointing it at me, I promise you won't." Then the sound changed. The distinctive whoop, whoop, whoop of rotor blades. Black Hawk. The young Russian's eyes went wide. He knew that sound. Michael smiled. "That would be my daughter. I'd run if I were you." The young man ran, dropped his weapon and bolted, leaving wounded companions behind. Michael didn't try to stop him. Let him run. Let him tell whoever sent him what happened when you came for Michael Harrington in his own diner. The helicopter circled overhead close enough to rattle remaining windows. Michael stood in the wreckage, broken glass, everywhere bullet holes in walls, blood on the floor, and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. The name Donovan echoed in his head like a church bell tolling. Martha stood slowly, looked at Michael with shock and resignation. "Delta Force, your daughter. It's complicated." He nodded toward the man she'd shot. "He going to live? Probably. Femoral would be spurting, clean through muscle, painful but survivable." Michael pulled out his phone. "I'll call the sheriff. You call an ambulance." His phone buzzed. Text from Catherine. En route. ETA 6 minutes. Status. Michael typed back, "Secure. 4 hostiles, 3 down, 1 ran. Civilians safe. Wait for local LEO." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Copy. See you in 5. She was coming anyway. Catherine Elizabeth Harrington never was good at following orders. Too much like her father. Michael looked at the Russian on the floor. "What's your name?" The Russian spat blood. "Alexander." "Well, Alexander, when you get out of the hospital and they deport you back to whatever hole you crawled from, deliver a message. Tell Colonel Donovan that I know. Tell him I've known for 15 years that Eleanor's death wasn't an accident. Tell him I've been looking every single day. And tell him his ghosts are coming home." The Black Hawk touched down in the parking lot. Catherine Harrington was out and moving before the skid settled weapon ready. Alpha Team behind her in perfect tactical formation. She cleared the door like a textbook breach, and her eyes found Michael standing in chaos, with blood on his shirt and a knife in his hand. For just a second, something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or the terror of realizing how close she'd come to losing him. Then the professional mask came down. "Clear," she called, and her team secured weapons, checked wounded, established perimeter. Catherine crossed to Michael in 3 strides, looked him over. She was 42, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's steel-gray eyes. Delta Force had carved away any softness, leaving only sharp edges and precise movement. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine. Split lip, nothing that won't heal." "Alexander Volkov," she said, looking at the Russian being secured by her team. "Known associate of several Eastern European crime syndicates, wanted in 6 countries." She turned back to Michael. What was he doing here? Michael met her eyes, delivering the news he'd waited 15 years to share. "James Donovan is alive, Kate. He sent these men. He killed your mother." The words hung heavy as stones. Catherine's face went very still, the kind of stillness that came before volcanic eruptions. Her hand drifted to her sidearm. "Where is he?" "I don't know, but now we have leverage." Michael nodded toward Alexander Volkov. "And leverage gets answers." Sheriff Tom Bradley arrived, took one look at the Delta Force operators and bullet-riddled diner, and sighed. "Michael, Catherine, someone want to tell me what happened." Catherine's phone rang before Michael could answer. She listened, expression hardening. "Understood. Coordinates." She wrote on her forearm. "Copy. Alpha Team en route. ETA 30 minutes. She ended the call. "We have him. Intelligence intercepted a coded transmission 20 minutes ago. Old Cold War cipher. Haven't seen it used in 15 years. They traced it to an abandoned training facility in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the old SEAL compound we decommissioned in 2009. Michael felt something cold settle in his stomach. The old compound where he and James had trained together. Become brothers. Had their first drinks after Hell Week. "He wants me to come." "Then we don't go. We send a team. He'll rabbit." "You know he will. 30 years of fieldcraft. He'll have a dozen escape routes." Michael shook his head. "He wants to talk to me. Wants me to understand why. It's the only way we get closure." "I have to go. Then I'm going with you. Non-negotiable, Dad." She was already issuing orders. "Jake, take point. Maria, overwatch. Find high ground with clear line of sight. Devon, tech. I want full surveillance. We go dark quiet. And we don't give this bastard a chance to slip away." Martha stepped forward, blood on her apron, but eyes clear. "Michael, a word?" They moved to the side while Catherine coordinated with her team. Martha lowered her voice. "James Donovan, you're sure?" Volkov confirmed it. Martha's face hardened. "I monitored some strange communications from Mexico about 3 years after Eleanor died. NSA contacts flagged it, but nothing concrete. I had suspicions." Michael stared at her. "You never told me." "What would I have said? That I thought your best friend faked his death and might be responsible for your wife's murder, without proof. She shook her head. I've been watching Michael, keeping tabs through old networks. There have been whispers about a group called Eagle's Talon, former Special Forces intelligence officers gone rogue. Martha, how deep are you still in deep enough? She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small device that looked like an ordinary key fob. Tracking beacon still works on the old frequencies. They won't be monitoring for it. She pressed it into his palm. I'm coming with you. No, too dangerous. I was monitoring Soviet communications while you were still learning to field strip an M16. She smiled, but there was nothing soft about it. I know James Donovan. I know how he thinks. And unlike you, I never trusted him. You'll need me. Catherine walked back over. Dad, we're ready. Transport's outside. One more person. Michael nodded to Martha. Catherine raised an eyebrow. The diner owner, Martha, smiled thinly. NSA Special Activities Division, 1982 to 1997, specialized in signals intelligence and Russian operations. After that, combat nurse, 1st Medical Battalion. She held Catherine's gaze. I was also your mother's best friend from college, and I've been watching your father's back for 15 years while he chased ghosts. Catherine looked at her father. Michael nodded once, confirming everything. Fine, Catherine said. But you follow my orders. This is my operation. Wouldn't have it any other way, Commander Harrington. The drive took 40 minutes. Blackhawks paralleling their route. Michael sat in Catherine's tactical vehicle, watching Virginia roll past. The Blue Ridge Mountains rose in the distance, autumn foliage, painting them in scarlet and gold. Michael thought about the last time he'd seen James Donovan. 3 years after Eleanor's funeral, a bar in Arlington, both drunk. James talking about leaving, disappearing somewhere warm. Michael had thought he meant retirement. I'm tired, James had said. Tired of pretending. Tired of being second best. Tired of watching other people get everything I should have had. Michael had barely listened, too wrapped in his own grief. 6 months later, James was dead, drowning in Mexico. Body never recovered. Paperwork so clean, it had taken 3 years of digging to find inconsistencies. You okay? Catherine's voice pulled him back. Just thinking about James, about how I missed it. 30 years, and I never saw what he was becoming. Jealousy, Martha said from the back seat. People have killed for less. Jealousy, envy, feeling cheated. Those are old poisons. They've started wars, toppled kingdoms, turned friends into enemies. We're about to get answers, Catherine said, eyes on the road, and answers don't care whether we understand them. When did you get so wise? Michael asked softly. I had good teachers. She didn't look at him, but her hand briefly touched his shoulder. It was the most physical contact they'd had in years. After Eleanor died, something in Michael had shut down. He'd thrown himself into the search for answers, neglecting the living for the dead. Catherine had joined the military, following in his footsteps, but keeping her emotional distance. Both of them too much alike, stubbornly independent, refusing to need anyone. They'd loved each other from a distance. Safe, controlled. The road narrowed, winding through dense forest. Catherine handled the Ford F-150 with precision, taking curves at speeds that would have been dangerous for most drivers. Her Delta Force training evident in everything she did. Tell me about James, she said. Not the uncle I knew growing up, the man you served with. Michael looked out at the mountains. We met in Bud's training 1982, Hell Week, coldest winter on record. Most guys dropped out. James and I made it through, saved each other really. He was brilliant, tactically perfect. Best shot I ever saw. Better than you? Martha asked. Different. I was patient. He was instinctive. Together, we were unstoppable. Michael shook his head. Somalia, 1993, Mogadishu. We were separated from our unit, pinned down for 36 hours. He took a bullet meant for me. I carried him 3 miles to extraction. And Panama, Catherine asked. 1989. Operation Just Cause. Your mother was pregnant with you. James was there when I got the news. He promised me we'd make it home. Led a mission that should have been suicide, but got every man out alive. Desert Storm, Martha said quietly. You were both decorated. Presidential Unit Citation. After that, Kosovo, Bosnia. Michael's voice grew distant. By 2007, we were being considered for command positions. Joint Special Operations Command was looking for new leadership. Martha leaned forward. And they chose you instead of him. Michael nodded slowly. Director of Special Operations, February 2010. James was the obvious choice. More field experience, more missions. But they picked me. Why? Catherine asked. Temperament? Leadership qualities? James was a brilliant tactician, but he was reckless with his men. Took unnecessary risks. The brass wanted someone steadier. And 3 months later, Mom died, Catherine said quietly. The car fell silent. The implication hung in the air, too heavy for words. We're here, Catherine said, pulling off the main road onto a dirt track. She drove another quarter-mile, then parked behind a screen of trees. We go on foot from here. Radio silence, unless absolutely necessary. Martha pulled a small case from her bag, opened it, to reveal a compact pistol and what looked like vintage communication equipment. KGB scanner modified, still works on old frequencies. She caught Michael's look. What I kept some souvenirs. They moved through the forest in silence. Catherine took point, Michael following Martha, bringing up the rear. Despite their age, both older adults moved with the quiet efficiency of people who'd spent lifetimes in dangerous places. Through the trees, the compound appeared like a ghost. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire, guard towers empty, buildings institutional gray, decommissioned in 2009 after budget cuts. Since then, it had sat empty, waiting. James had made the decision for them, turning it into hiding place, or trap, or maybe just a stage for whatever final performance he'd planned. Catherine held up her hand, signaling a halt. She touched her earpiece. Alpha team in position. Maria has overwatch from the ridge. Devon reports no electronic signatures except one low-frequency transmission from the main building. He's alone, Michael asked. Or wants us to think he is. Catherine checked her weapon. Dad, you're not armed. I've got my knife. Take this. She handed him a sidearm. Colt M1911. The old standard issue, not the newer models. Michael looked at it surprised. You carry this. Belonged to Grandpa from his time in Korea. I keep it as a backup. She didn't meet his eyes. Thought you might appreciate the vintage. It was the closest thing to sentiment he'd seen from her in years. Michael checked the weapon with practiced hands. Loaded. Safety on. Perfect condition. Martha, you should stay here. Let us handle this. Martha checked her own weapon. Not a chance. I've been waiting 15 years to look that bastard in the eye. Besides, you'll need my scanner to detect any surveillance equipment. Catherine nodded reluctantly. Fine, but stay behind us. They approached on foot. No stealth. James had invited them, and they were accepting with the full weight of Delta Force backing their play. The main building's door was open. Inside, mildew and decay, years of abandonment. Their footsteps echoed on concrete, and somewhere in darkness a voice spoke. Michael, I was starting to think you wouldn't come. James Donovan stepped into sunlight slanting through a broken window. Older, grayer, carrying 79 years and untold sins, but unmistakably James. Same sharp eyes, same military bearing, same face Michael had trusted with his life across 3 continents. "Hello, James. You brought Catherine. Always did have trouble following orders." James smiled, thin and bitter. "Hello, goddaughter. You've grown up." Catherine's hand was on her sidearm. "Colonel Donovan, you're under arrest for the murder of Eleanor Harrington, conspiracy to commit murder treason, and approximately 24 other charges." Efficient, professional. James's smile widened. "You trained her well, Michael, but we both know she's not going to arrest me. Not until she hears the truth. Not until you understand why Eleanor had to die." Michael's fists clenched, but his voice stayed level. "There's no version where killing an innocent woman makes sense, James." "Innocent?" James laughed like breaking glass. "Eleanor wasn't innocent. She was the reason you got everything I deserved." He began pacing like a caged animal. "The promotion in 2010. They chose you because you had a family, because you were stable and grounded. I was better, Michael. Faster, higher kill count, more successful missions. But you had a wife who smiled at the right people and made you look like husband material instead of what we really were. Killers with government permission." Catherine's jaw tightened, but Michael's hand on her arm held her back. "Not yet. Let him talk." "I gave my entire life to this country," James continued. 40 years of bleeding for the flag. And when it came time to choose a director, they picked you. Not because you were better, because you had a pretty blonde wife and a daughter and looked good in recruitment photos. So you killed her." Michael's voice was flat. "You murdered Eleanor because I got promoted. I gave you a chance to quit. After she died, I waited for you to fall apart, to resign, to prove that without her, you were nothing. But you didn't. You kept going, kept leading, kept being everyone's favorite soldier, while I rotted in your shadow. So yes, I cut the brake lines and watched the news and waited for you to break." James's smile became a grimace. "Except you never did." The words hung like smoke from a funeral pyre. Catherine made a sound between sob and growl. Weapon coming up, trained center mass on the man who'd been her godfather, who'd taught her to ride a bike. "Kate, wait." Michael's hand was steady on her shoulder. "He wants you to shoot him. He's dying. I can see it. Cancer, maybe. Something terminal. He wants to go out a martyr instead of rotting in a cell." James's smile confirmed it. "Pancreatic. Stage 4. 3 months, if I'm unlucky. I'm not spending my last days in military prison being studied by psychologists." He spread his arms. "So yes, I wanted you here. Wanted you to know it was me. Wanted you to understand that I won. I took the thing you loved most, and you never knew until today." "You didn't win." Michael stepped forward, something in his eyes making James step back. "You destroyed yourself, James. Not me. You. Every decision, selling secrets, killing Eleanor, faking your death, those weren't about me. They were about you refusing to accept that maybe they promoted me because I gave a damn about people under my command. Saw them as human beings instead of assets. You were brilliant tactically, but terrible as a leader, and deep down you knew it." "Shut up." James's hand moved toward his jacket. "Gun." Catherine's training took over. Her finger moved to the trigger, but before she could fire, a sound cracked across the compound. Sharp, precise, final. James staggered, red blooming across his shoulder. Not a kill shot. Maria Santos, Catherine's sniper, had made the decision to wound instead of kill, to give Michael and Catherine the choice. Down on the ground, hands visible now. Catherine was moving weapon-trained. James collapsed to his knees, hand pressed to his shoulder. Blood seeped between fingers. He was laughing. "You still don't get it. Eagle's talon isn't done. I'm just one piece. There are others. They know about Catherine. When I'm gone, they'll keep coming. Let them come." Michael stood over the man who'd been his brother. "We'll be ready." Alpha Team moved in, securing James with zip ties, field dressing his shoulder. Catherine read him his right's voice, steady, despite tears tracking silently down her face. Devon was on comms, calling for medical evacuation and federal transport. Michael walked outside into sunlight that felt too bright. Martha followed, standing beside him in silence. Not quite support, not quite accusation, just presence. Michael stared at the mountains, thinking of all the years wasted chasing shadows, while the living breathed beside him. 15 years of Tuesdays at Mason's diner alone with his coffee and grief, while Martha silently kept watch. 15 years of brief phone calls with Catherine, neither of them knowing how to bridge the gap Eleanor's death had left. Martha touched his arm gently. "Michael." The scanner picked up a transmission just before we arrived. She held out the device display, showing a pattern of pulses. "It's an old Russian code. Translation roughly, birds leaving the nest." Michael's blood went cold. Military code. Operations activated. Catherine emerged from the building, face grim. "Dad, we've got a problem. Eagle's talon." James says it's not just him. It's a network of former Special Forces intelligence officers gone rogue. They've been planning something for years. Martha held up the scanner. "Birds leaving the nest." Catherine's phone buzzed. She checked it, face going pale. "Security alert at Mason's diner. Second attack in progress." "It was a diversion," Michael said, "getting us away from town." "Or," Martha said quietly, "getting everyone away from here." In the distance, they heard the whine of engines starting up. Catherine was already moving barking orders into her comm. "Devon northeast perimeter. We've got movement." James Donovan's laughter echoed from inside the building. "You're too late. Michael, Operation Falling Eagle is already in motion. You can't stop what's coming." Michael looked at the mountains, at his daughter mobilizing her team at Martha, with her ancient scanner at the compound where he and James had once been brothers. 15 years of searching for answers, and now that he had them, they only led to more questions. The sun was setting, painting the Blue Ridge Mountains gold and crimson. In the distance, more helicopters approached. Reinforcements or enemies, it was impossible to tell. The game had just begun. Catherine rejoined them, face set, in the determined expression he recognized from Eleanor. "Dad, Martha, we need to move. Now. Whatever Eagle's talon is planning, it's happening tonight." Michael checked the M1911, feeling its familiar weight. "Then we stop them tonight." Martha nodded, resolute. Together. For the first time in 15 years, Michael Harrington felt something stir inside him that wasn't grief or rage, something adjacent to hope. Not quite peace, but purpose. The ghosts weren't quiet yet, but they were no longer hunting alone. The Ford F-150 thundered down the mountain road, tires gripping asphalt, as Catherine Harrington navigated hairpin turns with surgical precision. Michael braced himself against the dashboard, the Colt M1911 a reassuring weight in his hand. In the back seat, Martha Sullivan studied her scanner face, illuminated by its green glow. "2 more transmissions," she reported. "Same cipher. Eagles in flight and nest secured. Military precision." The autumn sun was setting behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in flames. Michael couldn't help but think it looked like an omen. He checked his phone again, no reception. They were cut off. "What exactly is Eagle's Talon?" Catherine asked, eyes never leaving the road. "James gave us nothing concrete." "A shadow organization," Martha answered. "Rogue operators, people who felt betrayed by the system. James started recruiting in 2011, a year after your mother died. My NSA contacts picked up whispers over the years, but nothing solid enough to act on." "And you never told me," Michael said quietly. Martha met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "I've been trying to protect you, Michael. Both of you. I didn't have proof, just suspicions. And suspicions can get people killed in our line of work." The truck rounded another bend, and suddenly they had reception again. Catherine's phone exploded with messages. She passed it to Michael. "Read them." Michael scrolled through. Multiple security alerts. Mason's Diner untouched. False alarm. He frowned. Second team reports movement at Langley Air Force Base. Third team suspicious activity at Norfolk Naval Station. "It's a coordinated attack," Catherine said. "But what's the target?" Martha leaned forward. "Check the date." "October 11th, Michael said, not understanding. "Tomorrow is October 12th, Navy Day. There's a ceremony at Norfolk. All the top brass will be there." Catherine's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "And Langley is hosting a Joint Chiefs meeting tonight. Preliminary security for tomorrow's event." Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. James wouldn't just target military leadership. It's too obvious, too limited in scope. He thinks bigger than that. The diner was a feint, Catherine realized. They're watching our response patterns, testing reaction times. Martha's scanner beeped again. Another transmission. Different frequency. She adjusted dials with practiced fingers. "This one's not using the old cipher. It's—" Her eyes widened. "Michael, it's Broken Arrow. The military code for a nuclear incident. A missing nuclear weapon." "That's impossible," Catherine said. "Nuclear materials are accounted for. There would be alerts protocols activated." "Unless someone inside the system is suppressing those alerts," Michael replied. James had access to everything. Knew every protocol, every fail-safe. Catherine's phone rang. She answered, putting it on speaker. "Commander Harrington? Commander, this is Lieutenant Barnes. We've secured Donovan. He's en route to medical under heavy guard. But we found something in the compound. An operations room hidden below the main building. Maps, surveillance photos. They've been planning this for years. Target, multiple. But the primary appears to be tomorrow's Navy Day ceremony. Sir, they have photos of every admiral, every joint chief who will be attending. And something else." A pause. "Schematics for a portable nuclear device. Russian design, Cold War era. We thought they were all accounted for." Michael and Martha exchanged looks. The pieces were falling into place. "Lieutenant, alert all commands. Full lockdown at Norfolk and Langley. I want nest teams activated." Catherine's voice was calm, but Michael could see the tension in her jaw. "Already done, Commander. But there's something else, the photos, the surveillance. It's not just military targets. They have photos of Mason's Diner, of your father's house, of your apartment in Arlington." "They've been watching us," Michael said. "For years," the lieutenant confirmed. "And, sir, some of these photos, they could only have been taken by someone with access, someone inside." "A mole in Delta Force," Catherine said, voice hardening. "James mentioned it. Said 30% of Eagle's Talon had infiltrated special operations." "Trust no one outside this vehicle," Michael said. "We operate alone until we know who's compromised." "Copy that." Barns out. Catherine accelerated the truck's engine, growling as they descended from the mountains. We need to warn Langley in person. If there's a nuke in play, first we need to know exactly who we're dealing with, Michael said. Martha, can you still access your old NSA databases? Not officially, but I know people who can. I'll need a secure line. My safe house in Charlottesville, Michael decided. 20 minutes from here. Secure communications weapons cache. We can regroup, make a plan. Catherine nodded. Makes sense. We need to... She trailed off, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. Michael turned. Headlights appeared on the road behind them, closing fast. We've got company, Catherine said, voice dropping into combat calm. 2 vehicles. Military grade by the look of them. Eagle's Talon, Martha confirmed, checking her scanner again. They're broadcasting on encrypted frequencies. Same pattern as the messages from the compound. Catherine pressed the accelerator to the floor. The F-150 surged forward, engine roaring as they took the next curve at dangerous speed. Kate, these mountains are their territory, Michael cautioned. They chose this battlefield. Then we change the terms of engagement. Catherine spun the wheel hard, taking a sudden turn onto a dirt forest road. The truck bounced violently, suspension protesting as they left the paved surface. The pursuing vehicles hesitated at the turnoff, then followed. But Catherine had already gained precious seconds. She navigated the rough terrain with expert precision, using the truck's 4-wheel drive to power through areas that would slow their pursuers. There, Michael pointed to a narrow path between trees. That leads to the old fire road. It'll take us down the east face, connect with Highway 29. Catherine nodded, taking the turn. The path was barely wide enough for the truck branches scraping against the sides. Behind them, the headlights of their pursuers vanished, unable to follow on the narrow trail. They'll circle around, Martha warned. Try to cut us off at the highway. Michael checked the M1911, making sure a round was chambered. Then we'll be ready. The fire road was steep and treacherous, loose gravel, making traction difficult. Catherine handled it masterfully, using the truck's weight to maintain control on the descent. 5 minutes to the highway, she reported. They'll be waiting, Michael said. We need a distraction. Martha reached into her bag, pulled out what looked like an old transistor radio. Signal jammer, old school but effective. It'll disrupt their communications, maybe their vehicle electronics, if they're not shielded. Range, half-mile give or take. Michael nodded. Good enough. Kate, when we hit the highway, floor it. Don't stop for anything. The trees thinned as they approached the bottom of the mountain. Through gaps in the foliage, Michael could see the highway below stretching like a black ribbon through the valley. And parked across the access road where the fire trail met the highway, 3 black SUVs waited in ambush formation. Company, Michael said quietly. I see them. Catherine's voice remained calm. Options. Michael studied the terrain, mind racing through tactical calculations. They've blocked the direct route, but they've left the drainage culvert exposed. If you hit it at the right angle, we might be able to bypass their roadblock. Might. It'll be close. Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. Better than a firefight. Hold on. She accelerated down the final stretch of the fire road, the truck gathering momentum. Martha activated the signal jammer, its lights blinking as it powered up. The men at the roadblock spotted them scrambling to their vehicles. But the signal jammer was already working its magic, creating confusion as their communications failed. Catherine aimed the truck directly at the concrete drainage ditch that ran alongside the highway. At the last possible moment, she turned the wheel sharply, using the ditch as a ramp. The truck went airborne for a heart-stopping moment, then crashed down onto the highway with a bone-jarring impact. Tires screamed on asphalt, as Catherine fought for control, the truck fishtailing before she brought it back in line. Without hesitation, she accelerated onto the highway, leaving the roadblock behind. In the rearview mirror, Michael watched the Eagle's Talon operatives scrambling to their vehicles, but they were already falling behind. "Clean escape," he said, allowing himself a small smile. "For now," Catherine replied, checking her mirrors. "They'll regroup, call ahead. We need to get off the main roads." "Take the next exit," Michael directed. "There's a network of county roads that'll get us to Charlottesville without using the highways." The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving Michael acutely aware of his age. The pain in his joints from the rough ride, the ache in his back. 81 years old and still fighting, still running. The irony wasn't lost on him. "You okay?" Martha asked, quietly noticing his discomfort. "Getting too old for field work," Michael admitted. "Aren't we all?" Martha smiled, but her eyes remained serious. "Michael, what James said about Eleanor, about why he did it." "Not now," Michael cut her off, voice tight. Catherine glanced at him, then back to the road. "We need to talk about it eventually, Dad. What he said about the promotion, about Mom being the reason you were chosen over him. It was delusion. Jealousy twisted his mind." "But was there truth in it?" Catherine persisted. "The way the military looked at family stability for leadership positions." Michael stared out the window at the darkening landscape. "Yes," he finally admitted. Having a family was seen as an asset. Stability, community ties. The perfect American soldier with the perfect American family. His voice turned bitter. "The irony is, I never wanted the promotion. I was ready to retire, spend more time with you and your mother. James knew that. So he didn't just take Mom from us," Catherine said quietly. "He took your future, our future as a family." The weight of those 15 lost years hung between them. All the birthdays, holidays, ordinary moments that should have been shared but weren't. A father and daughter orbiting each other at a distance, connected by grief but separated by their inability to face it together. "I failed you, Kate." Michael said the words emerging from some deep wounded place inside him. "After your mother died, I should have been there. Instead, I chased ghosts." Catherine's hands tightened on the wheel, but she didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was controlled, professional. "We're approaching Charlottesville. Directions to the safe house." Michael recognized the deflection for what it was. The conversation wasn't over, just postponed. Like father, like daughter. "Take the next right," he directed. "Then follow the road to the end." The safe house was a small cabin set back from the road, surrounded by pine trees that provided natural concealment. To casual observers, it would appear to be nothing more than a weekend getaway spot. Only someone with trained eyes would notice the reinforced door, the strategically placed exterior lights, the subtle security measures. Catherine parked the truck behind the cabin, out of sight from the road. "Secure the perimeter. I'll check inside." "I'll do the perimeter check," Michael countered. "I know the layout, the blind spots." Catherine hesitated, then nodded. The momentary power struggle resolved, they moved with practiced efficiency. Michael circled the property, checking the security systems he'd installed years ago. Still operational, no signs of tampering. Martha accompanied him, scanner in hand, sweeping for electronic surveillance. "Clear," she reported. "No bugs, no transmissions." They rejoined Catherine inside the cabin. She had already activated the backup generator, bringing the safe house's systems online. "Communications are up," she reported. "I've established a secure link with my second-in-command, Major Chen. She's coordinating with nest teams at Norfolk and Langley. No sign of nuclear materials yet, but they're still searching. Michael moved to a landscape painting on the wall, swung it aside to reveal a hidden safe. He entered the combination from memory and opened it to reveal an arsenal of weapons cache and documents. "Old habits," he said, noting Catherine's raised eyebrow. "Paranoia has its uses," Martha commented, already setting up her communications equipment on the dining table. She connected to her scanner fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm reaching out to my old NSA contacts. If they've detected any unusual communications patterns, it might give us insight into Eagle's Talon's next move." Michael selected weapons for each of them, modern sidearms, to supplement what they already carried: extra ammunition. Then, he pulled out a small black notebook from the safe, its pages filled with handwritten notes. "What's that?" Catherine asked. "Insurance." Michael opened it to reveal names, dates, coordinates. "I've been tracking inconsistencies in official reports for 15 years. Operations that didn't make sense, personnel reassignments without clear justification, funding discrepancies. I thought I was looking for Eleanor's killer, but I might have been documenting the rise of Eagle's Talon without realizing it." He spread the notebook open on the table. "James didn't build this organization overnight. He recruited, carefully positioned his people strategically. If we can identify his key lieutenants, we might be able to predict their next move." Catherine studied the notebook, her tactical mind connecting dots. "These dates correlate with major leadership changes in Special Operations commands. And these names," she pointed to several entries. "At least 3 of them are now in positions that would give them access to nuclear security protocols." Martha looked up from her computer. "I've got something. NSA detected an unusual pattern of communications 2 days ago. Burst transmissions, highly encrypted, originating from multiple locations but converging on a single point." "Where?" Michael asked. "An abandoned mining complex near Norfolk. NSA flagged it as suspicious, but didn't have enough to justify a raid." Catherine was already reaching for her phone. "I'll alert the Nest teams to redirect—" "Wait," Michael interrupted. "If Eagle's Talon has infiltrated the military as deeply as James claimed, then the Nest teams might be compromised." "We can't just ignore a potential nuclear threat," Catherine argued. "We're not ignoring it. We're going to handle it ourselves." Michael laid out a map of the Norfolk area. "A small team has a better chance of infiltrating undetected. 3 people who know they can trust each other." Martha nodded. "He's right. Eagle's Talon will be watching for official response teams. They won't be expecting a rogue operation." "This is insane," Catherine said, but her objection lacked conviction. "We're talking about a potential nuclear device. We need specialized equipment, radiation detectors, containment protocols." Michael returned to the safe, removed a small metal case. Inside was an antiquated but functional radiation detector. "Cold War relic. Still works." He looked at Martha. "You remember how to use these?" "Like riding a bike," she confirmed. "Though I never thought I'd need those skills again." Catherine stared at them both. "You two have been preparing for this for a long time, haven't you?" "Not this specifically," Michael admitted. "But something. The world doesn't just let old soldiers retire in peace, Kate. There's always one more mission." His daughter's face softened slightly. "You could have told me. I would have helped." "You had your own battles." Michael checked his watch. "We need to move. Norfolk is 3 hours away. If they're planning to hit the Navy Day ceremony, they'll position the device tonight." Martha's computer beeped. She studied the screen, face grave. Another transmission. Same source. Dawn operation confirmed. "That's our timeline," Michael said. "We locate and secure the device before dawn." Catherine nodded, professional mask back in place. "I'll coordinate with Major Chen, establish a backup plan in case we fail." But we go in dark, no official channels, minimal communication. Like old times, Martha said, sharing a look with Michael that spoke of missions decades past, secrets they still carried. As Catherine stepped outside to make her call, Martha moved closer to Michael. "You know what we're really doing, don't you? We're preventing a nuclear attack," Michael said, continuing to check his equipment. "Yes, but we're also walking into James Donovan's endgame." Martha's voice dropped lower. "Think about it, Michael. James is dying. He knew we'd capture him. This isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about legacy. His final statement." Michael paused, the weight of her words sinking in. "You think he wanted us to find the device? I think he wanted you to find it, to face an impossible choice." Martha's eyes were somber. "James was always obsessed with proving he was better than you. What better way than forcing you to make the ultimate sacrifice?" Before Michael could respond, Catherine returned. "Chen is on standby. She'll monitor official channels, feed us any intelligence without revealing our position." She surveyed them both. "What's wrong?" "Just discussing tactics," Michael said smoothly, but he could tell his daughter wasn't convinced. They gathered their equipment in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they prepared to leave, Michael paused at a small table near the door. On it sat a single photograph in a silver frame, Eleanor and Catherine, taken on Catherine's high school graduation day. Both smiling, unaware of how little time they had left together. Michael touched the frame gently. For 15 years he'd been driven by the need to find Eleanor's killer. Now that he had his answer, he felt strangely hollow. Revenge had sustained him for so long that its absence left a vacuum. "Dad!" Catherine stood in the doorway, watching him. For a moment, she looked so much like her mother that it took his breath away. "I'm coming." He turned from the photograph, squaring his shoulders. There would be time for reflection later, if they survived. The drive to Norfolk was tense each mile, bringing them closer to confrontation. They abandoned the truck 10 miles outside the city, switching to an inconspicuous sedan Martha borrowed from a long-term parking lot. Better to arrive anonymously. The abandoned mining complex sat on the outskirts of Norfolk, a relic from the 1950s when coal was still king. Its rusted structures rose like skeletal fingers against the night sky, surrounded by chain-link fence bearing faded "no trespassing" signs. They parked half a mile away, approaching on foot through dense underbrush. Catherine took point, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. Michael and Martha followed their movements slower, but no less precise. Age had taken its toll on their bodies, but not on their training or resolve. Martha consulted her scanner periodically, confirming the continuing transmissions from within the complex. As they neared the perimeter, Catherine held up a hand, signaling a halt. "Security cameras," she whispered, pointing to nearly invisible devices mounted on the fence posts. "Modern, motion-activated." "They're expecting company," Michael observed. Martha studied her scanner. "The signals are coming from the main building, Central Processing Facility." Michael surveyed the complex, identifying potential entry points, security measures, escape routes. Old instincts resurfacing. The ventilation shaft on the east side. It's partially collapsed, but still passable. Security would focus on obvious entry points. Catherine nodded. "I'll create a diversion on the west perimeter. Draw attention away from your approach." "Too dangerous," Michael objected. "We stay together." "We don't have time to argue, Dad. This is tactical necessity." Catherine's tone brooked no disagreement. "I have the training, the speed. I can evade capture if necessary. You and Martha locate the device." Michael recognized the logic even as every paternal instinct screamed against putting his daughter in danger. But Catherine wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was Commander Harrington Delta Force. And she was right. 15 minutes, he conceded. Then you join us at the central facility. Radio check every 5 minutes. If you miss a check-in, we come looking. Catherine nodded, slipping extra magazines for her sidearm into her pockets. Martha, can that scanner detect radiation signatures? Basic ones, yes. It'll get us close, but we'll need the Geiger counter for precision. Good enough. Catherine checked her watch. Synchronize. 0200 hours. I move in 5 minutes. You proceed to the ventilation shaft at 02 Tero. The military precision was comforting familiar. Michael watched his daughter disappear into the darkness, moving like a shadow between the trees. Pride mingled with fear in his chest. She'll be fine, Martha said quietly. She's your daughter, after all. That's what worries me, Michael replied, but his eyes betrayed his confidence in Catherine's abilities. 5 minutes later, a series of small explosions erupted on the western edge of the complex. Emergency lights activated, illuminating the perimeter. Guards, at least 6 that Michael could count, moved toward the disturbance. That's our cue, Michael whispered. They approached the eastern fence using bolt cutters to create an opening. The ventilation shaft was exactly as Michael remembered from his reconnaissance 15 years earlier, a remnant of the mine's original infrastructure, partially collapsed, but still accessible. Martha went first, her smaller frame navigating the tight space more easily. Michael followed, ignoring the protests from his aging joints. The shaft descended at a shallow angle, eventually opening into a maintenance tunnel beneath the main facility. Signal's stronger, Martha reported, checking the scanner. Directly above us. They found a service ladder leading up to the main level. Michael climbed first, pushing open the access hatch carefully. The central processing facility had been converted into what appeared to be a command center. Computer screens lined the walls, displaying security camera feeds, schematics, countdown timers. And in the center of the room, on a reinforced table, sat an object that made Michael's blood run cold. A portable nuclear device, Russian design, approximately the size of a large suitcase. Cold War engineering at its most terrifying. Compact, efficient, and devastating. The control panel glowed with active lights. Martha joined him, the Geiger counter in her hand, confirming what they already knew. It's armed, she whispered. Low yield, maybe 5 kilotons. Enough to destroy Norfolk Naval Station and everything within a 2-mile radius. Michael approached the device cautiously. Can you disarm it? Martha examined the control panel, face grim. Maybe, but I need time. And it's been modified from the original Soviet design. There could be booby traps, anti-tampering mechanisms. How much time? Martha calculated. 30 minutes minimum. And that's assuming I don't trigger any fail-safes. Michael checked his watch. Catherine's second radio check was due. Kate, status report. Static answered him. Kate, come in. More static. Martha looked up, alarm in her eyes. Something's wrong. Michael's hand moved to his weapon, but before he could draw it, the lights in the facility brightened. A door at the far end of the room opened. 4 armed men entered, weapons trained on Michael and Martha. Behind them walked Lieutenant Phillips, Catherine's second-in-command from her Delta Force team. And between them, hands zip-tied behind her back, was Catherine. Commander Harrington sends his regards, Phillips said with a cold smile. Oh, and before you try anything heroic, he held up Michael's radiation detector. We've been expecting you. James was quite confident you'd figure it out. Michael's mind raced, calculating odds, searching for options. But with Catherine as a hostage, his choices were severely limited. Where's James? He asked, playing for time. being transported to a secure medical facility under our control. Phillips gestured to the nuclear device. Beautiful, isn't it? Salvaged from a Soviet bunker in Kazakhstan. James acquired it 15 years ago, been saving it for a special occasion. The Navy Day ceremony, Martha said. Phillips nodded appreciatively. Smart lady. Yes, imagine it, the entire naval command structure wiped out in an instant. America's sea power decapitated. The perfect statement. Statement? Michael kept his voice even. You're talking about mass murder. I'm talking about sending a message. America betrayed its warriors. Used us, discarded us when convenient. Phillips's face hardened. You should understand that better than anyone, Harrington. How many missions did you lead? How many men did you lose? And for what? Politics. Bureaucracy. A system that cares more about optics than results. Michael recognized the rhetoric. He'd heard it before in various forms from disillusioned veterans. The difference was most of them didn't acquire nuclear weapons to make their point. And what happens after your statement? Martha asked, her hands slowly moving toward the scanner still clipped to her belt. Nuclear retaliation, global conflict. Phillips shrugged. Creative destruction. From the ashes of the old system, a new one will rise. One that respects warriors instead of politicians. James's vision, Michael said, understanding dawning. He's not just destroying the naval command. He's starting a war. The last war, Phillips confirmed. The one that resets everything. Catherine caught Michael's eye. A minute shift in her posture told him she was preparing to move. Despite being restrained, she was positioning herself, creating an opening. Michael needed to keep Phillips talking. And the Eagle's Talon organization, how deep does it go? Phillips smiled with genuine pride. Deeper than you can imagine. Military intelligence agencies, law enforcement. We've been placing our people for 15 years. James was very patient, very thorough. James is dying, Martha said. What happens to Eagle's Talon after he's gone? A cause outlives its founder. Phillips checked his watch. Enough conversation. We need to move the device to its final position. He gestured to his men. Secure them. We'll take them with us. James wanted Michael to witness the culmination of his work. As the men moved forward, Catherine made her move. Despite her bound hands, she drove her shoulder into the guard beside her, sending him stumbling into Phillips. In the same motion, she dropped to the floor, rolling away from the line of fire. Michael didn't hesitate. He drew the M1911, firing twice with the precision that had made him legendary in special operations. 2 guards down before they could react. Martha activated her scanner, which emitted a high-pitched electronic squeal, not its intended function, but an effective momentary distraction. Phillips recovered quickly, raising his weapon toward Catherine, who was still vulnerable on the floor. Michael saw the threat and made the only choice a father could. He threw himself forward, tackling Phillips as the gun discharged. Pain exploded in Michael's shoulder. Hot, searing agony that told him the bullet had found flesh. But Phillips was down, the gun knocked from his hand. Michael's momentum carried them both to the floor, where they grappled for control. Phillips was younger, stronger, uninjured. But Michael Harrington had spent a lifetime in combat, and age had not diminished his will. He drove his elbow into Phillips' throat, cutting off his air supply, then brought his knee up hard into the younger man's solar plexus. The fight was brief, brutal, and decisive. Phillips lay unconscious. The remaining guard had been neutralized by Martha, who stood over him with her pistol trained on his head, her free hand holding the radiation detector. "Dad!" Catherine had managed to work her way to a sitting position. "You're hit," Flesh wound, Michael grunted, though the spreading blood on his shirt suggested otherwise. Get yourself free. Martha rushed to Catherine, using a knife from one of the fallen guards to cut her restraints. Then she turned her attention to Michael's injury. Through and through, she reported after a quick examination. Missed the major arteries, but you're losing blood. Patch it up, Michael instructed. We still have a nuclear device to deal with. Catherine, now free, moved to the nuclear device. We need to disarm it. No, Michael said, grimacing as Martha applied pressure to his wound. That's what James wants, for us to be here trying to disarm it. This is a trap. What are you talking about? Catherine demanded. Think about it, Michael said. James knew we'd track the transmissions, knew we'd find this place. The security was sufficient to slow us down, but not stop us completely. Martha's eyes widened with understanding. This isn't the real device. It's a decoy, Michael confirmed. The real target isn't the Navy Day ceremony. That's too obvious, too predictable for someone like James. Catherine processed this, her tactical mind working through the implications. Then what's the real target? Michael thought about everything they knew about James Donovan. His psychology, his motivations, his obsession with legacy and recognition. Something personal. Something that would hurt me specifically. The safe house, Martha suggested. No, Michael shook his head. James thinks bigger than that. Realization struck him like a physical blow. Mason's diner. The diner? Catherine looked skeptical. Why would he target a small-town diner? Because it's where I go every Tuesday morning. Where I've spent 15 years mourning Eleanor. It's symbolic to him. Michael struggled to his feet, Martha supporting him. And it's in the center of town. Civilian casualties would be massive. Catherine checked one of the computer screens. These are linked to a central server. Maybe we can access Eagle's Talon's actual plans. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. I need a password. Michael thought back to his conversations with James, to the notebook full of clues he'd collected over 15 years. Try second best. It's how James always saw himself in relation to me. Catherine typed it in. The screen remained locked. No good. Try Eleanor, Martha suggested quietly. The screen unlocked instantly, revealing a network of files, communications, operational plans. Catherine navigated through them with practiced efficiency. You're right, Dad. The diner is the target. There's a second device scheduled for detonation at 0600 hours. Dawn, Martha said, when the breakfast crowd starts arriving. Michael checked his watch. 0330 hours. Less than 3 hours remaining. We need to move, now. Wait, Catherine continued scanning the files. There's more. Multiple targets all scheduled for sequential detonation throughout the day. Mason's diner is just the first. After that, military installations, government buildings. Her voice faltered. Dad, this isn't just a statement. It's the beginning of a coordinated attack across the entire eastern seaboard. Eagle's Talon revealing itself, Michael said grimly. James's final legacy. We need to alert authorities, Martha urged. Not yet, Michael cautioned. If Eagle's Talon is as deeply embedded as Phillips claimed, a general alert might tip them off, accelerate their timeline. Then what do we do? Catherine asked. Michael straightened, pushing through the pain of his injury. We stop the first attack. Secure the device at the diner. Once we have it, we can prove the threat is real. Identify which authorities we can trust. Catherine nodded, downloading files onto a portable drive. These contain the identities of Eagle's Talon operatives, their positions, the complete attack plan. Our insurance policy. They bound the unconscious Eagle's Talon members securely, then made their way out of the facility. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, the first hint of dawn approaching. Time was running out. Catherine drove, pushing the sedan to its limits on the empty pre-dawn roads. Michael sat beside her, Martha, in the back, continuing to monitor communications on her scanner. "Multiple transmissions," she reported. "They know something's wrong. The mining facility team missed their check-in." "How far to the diner?" Michael asked. "At this speed, just under 2 hours," Catherine answered, hands tight on the wheel. "Not fast enough," Michael muttered. "There's an airfield 15 minutes from here," Catherine said. "Small regional airport. Delta Force maintains emergency transportation assets there." "Will they release a helicopter to you without authorization?" Martha asked. Catherine's smile was cold. "They will when I tell them it's a matter of national security. And if that doesn't work, I'll take it anyway." Michael felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. "Kate, that's court-martial territory. Stopping multiple nuclear detonations outweighs career considerations, Dad." She glanced at him. "Besides, I learned from the best when it comes to bending rules for the greater good." The regional airport was quiet at that hour, a single sleepy security guard at the gate. Catherine's military ID and commanding presence were sufficient to gain them entry. The guard didn't even question Martha's presence or Michael's obviously injured state. The Delta Force emergency asset turned out to be a sleek black helicopter fueled and ready for immediate deployment. Catherine conducted a rapid pre-flight check while Michael and Martha settled in. "You sure you can fly with that shoulder?" Martha asked Michael quietly. "I'm not flying. Kate is." He managed a thin smile. "My little girl all grown up." Martha squeezed his hand. "She's extraordinary, Michael. Eleanor would be so proud." "I know." Michael looked out at the lightening sky. "I just wish I'd told her that more often." The helicopter lifted off smoothly, Catherine handling the controls with the same precision she brought to everything. They flew low, following the contours of the land to minimize radar visibility. The rising sun painted the landscape in gold and amber, a beautiful morning that belied the danger awaiting them. "ETA to Mason's Diner, 30 minutes, Catherine reported. Michael nodded, checking the fresh bandage Martha had applied to his shoulder. The pain was manageable now, pushed to the background by the urgency of their mission. "Martha, can that scanner detect the nuclear device's signature from the air?" Martha adjusted settings. "Possibly if we're close enough, but I'd need to calibrate it to filter out background radiation." "Do it," Michael instructed. "We need to locate the device before we land. Time is critical." As they approached the small Virginia town, Martha's scanner began to register readings. "I'm getting something. Faint, but consistent with the signature from the decoy device." "Location?" Catherine asked. Martha studied the readings. "Not the diner itself. Something nearby." She pointed to a structure adjacent to Mason's Diner. "There, the old hardware store. It's been closed for years." "Perfect hiding place," Michael nodded. "Close enough to the diner to achieve James's symbolic target, but separated enough to set up without attracting attention." Catherine began the descent, aiming for an empty field behind the hardware store. "I count 4 vehicles parked on the street. Black SUVs. Eagle's Talon security." "Heavy presence for a town this size," Michael observed. "They're expecting trouble." "And we're about to give it to them," Catherine confirmed, bringing the helicopter down with expert precision. The moment they touched down, she cut the engines. "Quick and quiet. We identify the device's exact location, then neutralize the security team." "I'll handle the device," Martha said, holding up the radiation detector. "You two deal with security." Michael checked his weapon, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "Just like old times, eh, Martha? Except back then I was patching you up after the mission, not during it." She gave him a look that held decades of shared history. Try not to get shot again. They moved from the helicopter with practiced stealth, approaching the back of the hardware store. The early morning light cast long shadows, providing some cover. Catherine took point Michael, following with Martha between them, scanner in hand. "Signal's getting stronger," Martha whispered. "Basement level, I think." Catherine found a rear entrance locked but easily bypassed with her tactical tools. They entered a storage room filled with abandoned inventory, dust thick on shelves of hardware supplies. 2 heat signatures on the main floor, Catherine reported, checking a compact thermal scanner. 1 at the front, 1 patrolling. "And the device?" Michael asked Martha. She pointed to a door leading downward. "Basement. Signal's clear now." Michael nodded. "Kate, secure the guards. Martha and I will locate the device." Catherine hesitated, clearly concerned about her father's injury. "Dad, I'm fine," he assured her. "Do your job, Commander. I'll do mine." A moment of understanding passed between them. Then Catherine moved toward the main floor, silent as a shadow, while Michael and Martha descended to the basement. The space below was dimly lit, a single bulb illuminating what had once been storage for the hardware store. Now it contained electronic equipment monitors, and in the center a metal case identical to the one they'd seen at the mining facility. Except this one was surrounded by additional security measures, tripwires, motion sensors, a camera monitoring the approach. "James left us a challenge," Michael observed. Martha consulted her scanner. "It's definitely active. Timer display shows 38 minutes remaining." Michael studied the security setup. "We need to bypass the motion sensors first, then disarm the tripwires. After that, we can access the device itself." "Can we do all that in 38 minutes?" Martha asked. "We have to." Michael began the delicate work of disabling the security measures, drawing on decades of experience with explosive devices and booby traps. His injured shoulder made the work more difficult, but his hands remained steady. Above them, they heard the muffled sounds of conflict, Catherine engaging the guards. Quick, professional, minimal noise. "First sensor bypassed," Michael reported, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool basement air. "Martha, can you reach the second one?" Martha carefully extended her arm past the disabled sensor, working on the next one in the sequence. "Almost got it." A loud crash came from upstairs, followed by gunfire. Michael tensed instinctively, wanting to go to his daughter's aid, but knowing the nuclear device had to take priority. "She can handle herself," Martha reminded him, focused on her task. "I know." Michael continued working. "Second tripwire disarmed." The basement door burst open. Catherine appeared, a fresh cut on her cheek, but otherwise unharmed. "Security neutralized, but we've got more company coming. Eagle's Talon must have a backup team in the area." "How long?" Michael asked, not looking up from his work. 10 minutes, maybe less." "The device is on a 35-minute timer," Martha informed her. "We've bypassed 2 of the 4 security measures." Catherine assessed the situation quickly. "I'll secure the perimeter, buy you time." She hesitated, then added, "Be careful, Dad." "You too, Katie." The childhood nickname slipped out without thought. Catherine's expression softened momentarily before she disappeared back upstairs. Michael and Martha worked in practiced tandem, each movement deliberate and precise. Years of training, decades of experience guiding their hands as they navigated the complex security system James had left for them. "Last tripwire," Michael announced. "Martha, be ready with the disarming procedure once we have access." Martha positioned herself, tools ready. "Just like Beirut in '83, she said, attempting to lighten the tension. "Let's hope this goes better than Beirut." Michael carefully cut the final wire, holding his breath, as he waited for any reaction. Nothing happened. "We're clear." They approached the device itself. Up close, it was more sophisticated than the decoy they'd seen earlier. The control panel was partially in Russian, partially modified with English labels. "James wanted you to be able to read it," Martha observed, "to understand exactly what he'd created." Michael studied the timer. 28 minutes remaining. "Can you disarm it?" Martha examined the control panel. "Yes, but it's not straightforward. Looks like James added his own fail-safes. If I make a mistake, it could accelerate the countdown." "No pressure," Michael said with grim humor. Martha began the delicate process of disarming the nuclear device, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who had trained for this exact scenario decades ago. Michael watched, providing assistance where needed, acutely aware of the minutes ticking away. Upstairs, gunfire erupted again, louder this time, more sustained. Catherine engaging the Eagle's Talon reinforcements. "Almost there," Martha murmured. "2 more sequences to deactivate." The basement door crashed open again. This time it wasn't Catherine. 2 men in tactical gear, weapons raised, stormed in. "Step away from the device," the first one shouted. Michael drew his weapon in one fluid motion, firing twice. The first man went down. The second returned fire, forcing Michael to dive behind a stack of crates for cover. "Keep working," he called to Martha, who had ducked but continued the disarming procedure. Bullets splintered the crates around Michael. His shoulder wound protested as he shifted position, trying to get a clear shot. The gunman was well trained, maintaining cover while advancing methodically. 19 minutes, Martha reported calmly, despite the chaos. Michael waited for the gunman to move again, then took his shot. The bullet found its mark, and the second intruder collapsed. "Status," he called to Martha. "Final sequence," she responded. "Need 2 more minutes." More footsteps thundered above them. The gunfire had intensified. Catherine was outnumbered, fighting against overwhelming odds to buy them time. Michael made a decision. "Finish it," he instructed Martha. "I'm going to help Kate." "Michael, you can handle this." He met her eyes. "I trust you." Martha nodded once, understanding the weight of that trust. Michael moved toward the stairs, pausing only to retrieve ammunition from the fallen gunmen. His shoulder burned with each movement, but adrenaline kept him functioning. The scene upstairs was chaos. Catherine had taken a defensive position behind the old hardware counter, exchanging fire with at least 5 Eagle's Talon operatives who had entered through the front. She was pinned down, outnumbered, running low on ammunition. Michael assessed the situation in seconds. The attackers were focused on Catherine, unaware of his presence at the rear of the store. He moved silently into position, taking advantage of the clutter and shadows. His first shot took an attacker by surprise, dropping him instantly. The others turned momentarily, confused by the new threat. Catherine used the distraction to advance her position, taking down another operative with precise fire. Together, father and daughter worked in perfect synchronization, as if they'd been fighting side by side for years instead of maintaining their emotional distance. They communicated without words, covering each other's movements, creating crossfire that left their opponents with no safe ground. 2 more Eagle's Talon operatives fell. The last one, realizing he was outmatched, attempted to retreat toward the front door. Catherine's final bullet caught him in the leg, sending him crashing to the floor. "Secure him," Michael instructed, already moving back toward the basement stairs. Martha's finishing with the device. The wounded operative glared up at Catherine as she approached, weapon trained on his head. "You're too late," he spat. "This is just the beginning. Eagle's Talon is everywhere." "Not for long," Catherine replied, zip-tying his hands with efficient movements. Michael descended the basement stairs to find Martha standing beside the nuclear device. Its control panel, now dark timer, stopped at 00742. Cutting it close, he observed relief evident in his voice. "Dramatic tension," Martha replied with a tired smile. "How's Catherine?" "Securing the last hostile. We need to contact Major Chen, get nest teams here to properly contain this thing." Michael gestured to the device. "And we need to alert authorities about the rest of Eagle's Talon's plan." Martha nodded, gathering her equipment. "Michael, what James did. The lengths he went to. It wasn't just about the promotion, or Eleanor." "I know." Michael's voice was heavy with the weight of understanding. "He wanted to destroy everything I cared about. The country I serve, the town where I live, the people I love. A complete erasure of my life and legacy. Because in his mind, you erased his," Martha concluded. They climbed the stairs together, emerging into the hardware store where Catherine was interrogating the wounded Eagle's Talon operative. "He confirms there are 5 more devices," she reported, "scheduled for sequential detonation throughout the day." "We have the location data from the files you downloaded," Michael reminded her. "We can stop them." Catherine nodded already on her secure phone, with Major Chen coordinating response teams. Martha set up her communications equipment, connecting with her NSA contacts, to identify and locate Eagle's Talon operatives embedded in government positions. Michael stepped outside onto the street, watching as the sun rose fully over the small Virginia town. Mason's Diner stood across the street, untouched, its open sign flickering to life as the early morning breakfast crowd began to arrive. Ordinary people starting an ordinary day, unaware of how close they had come to annihilation. In the distance, sirens approached. Official response teams finally arriving. Michael knew the next hours would be filled with debriefings, coordinated operations to neutralize the remaining threats, the beginning of the end for Eagle's Talon. But for now, in this moment of quiet, between crisis and resolution, he allowed himself to feel the weight of the past 15 years. The grief, the obsession, the isolation. And beneath it all, the realization that in searching for Eleanor's killer, he had lost precious years with the living with his daughter, with friends like Martha, with the possibility of moving forward instead of remaining trapped in the past. Catherine joined him outside her tactical gear, contrasting sharply with the peaceful small-town backdrop. "Nest teams are en route. Major Chen has already coordinated raids on 3 of the 5 remaining device locations." "Good work, Commander," Michael said formally. Catherine studied him, then asked quietly, "What happens now, Dad? After this is over?" Michael looked across at Mason's Diner, where Martha was now speaking with the owner, explaining the police presence, the helicopter in the nearby field. "Now," Michael said slowly, "we start living again." His daughter's hand found his, squeezing gently. A simple touch, bridging years of distance. Behind them, the first Nest team vehicles arrived, specialists in hazmat suits approaching the hardware store. The machinery of official response grinding into action. But Michael Harrington stood still, his daughter's hand in his, watching the sun rise over the town he'd protected, feeling for the first time in 15 years the possibility of dawn after a very long night. The aftermath of a crisis has its own rhythm. First comes the chaos, the frantic response of authorities, the securing of scenes, the assessment of damage. Then, the questioning, endless debriefings, statements given, and recorded facts established and verified. Finally, the silence, the empty space when adrenaline recedes, when the danger has passed, but its shadow remains. Michael Harrington knew this rhythm well. He had lived through it dozens of times in his long career. But this time felt different. This time, the crisis had been deeply personal, the danger aimed directly at everything he loved. 3 days had passed since they had disarmed the nuclear device at the old hardware store. 3 days of coordinated operations across the eastern seaboard, neutralizing the remaining Eagle's Talon threats. All 5 additional devices had been secured. Dozens of Eagle's Talon operatives had been arrested, their network unraveling, as members turned on each other, bargaining for leniency. Michael sat in a nondescript conference room at Langley, his shoulder properly bandaged, now the pain managed with prescription medication that made him feel foggy and distant. Catherine sat beside him, still in uniform, her posture military perfect, despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. Martha Sullivan completed their trio, looking oddly out of place in the CIA headquarters, yet somehow belonging there more than anyone. The door opened, and Director of National Intelligence Lawrence Freeman entered, accompanied by 2 senior military officials. Freeman was in his 60s, with a reputation for uncompromising integrity and a personal history with Michael that went back 30 years. "The President has been fully briefed," Freeman announced without preamble. "Operation Clean Sweep is underway. Every individual identified in the files you recovered is being investigated. So far, we've confirmed 67 Eagle's Talon operatives in sensitive positions across military and intelligence services." "And James Donovan?" Michael asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Freeman's expression tightened. "Died during emergency surgery yesterday. Complications from his gunshot wound exacerbated by the late-stage pancreatic cancer." He paused, producing a sealed envelope. "He left this for you, found in his personal effects." Michael stared at the envelope, making no move to take it. Freeman placed it on the table and continued. "The President wishes to express his personal gratitude. You 3 prevented what would have been the most devastating domestic terrorist attack in our nation's history." "What about Catherine's status?" Michael asked. "She commandeered military equipment, operated outside the chain of command." Freeman allowed himself a small smile. "Officially, Commander Harrington was operating under classified orders throughout the incident. Her actions have been retroactively authorized at the highest level." Catherine's expression remained neutral, but Michael detected the slight relaxation in her shoulders. "And Martha," Michael pressed. "Her involvement needs to be protected. Ms. Sullivan's contribution will be recognized appropriately, but discreetly," Freeman assured them. "Her previous service record has been reactivated with all associated benefits and protections." Martha nodded once, satisfied. "And the town? The civilians who were placed at risk? A cover story has been established. Industrial espionage, conventional explosives. The nuclear element remains classified." Freeman gathered his papers. "You'll need to remain available for further debriefings, but consider yourselves on administrative leave for the next 2 weeks." After Freeman and his entourage departed, the 3 sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the bureaucratic resolution to their ordeal. "So that's it," Catherine finally said. 15 years of searching, and it ends with a commendation and 2 weeks off." "Not quite ended," Michael said, finally reaching for the envelope Freeman had left. He held it for a long moment, feeling its weight, not physical, but emotional. The last words of the man who had been his brother in arms, then his most bitter enemy. "Do you want privacy?" Martha asked quietly. Michael shook his head. "No more secrets between us." But he opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the single page inside. James Donovan's handwriting was shaky, but still recognizable, the precise script of a man trained to document field reports with clarity. "Michael," he began reading aloud, "if you're reading this, I've failed. Or perhaps succeeded, depending on how you choose to view it. Death was coming for me one way or another. I merely chose to make it meaningful. You always were better than me, not at the work itself, but at living with what the work required. I could kill without hesitation, but you could kill and still remain human. That's what they saw when they chose you over me. That's why Eleanor loved you, instead of me. Michael paused, the revelation striking him like a physical blow. Catherine reached for his hand, steadying him. I loved her too, you know, he continued reading, from the moment you introduced us at Quantico. For years I told myself I could be content. Being your friend, her friend, little Katie's godfather. Playing the supporting role in the Michael Harrington story. But the promotion was the final insult. Everything I had sacrificed, everything I had accomplished, and still you were chosen. So I took her from you. I wanted you to feel what I felt, the emptiness, the rage, the sense of having everything you valued stolen away. I expected you to break, to resign, to fade away into obscurity. Instead, you endured. You continued serving, continued leading, continued being the hero. And in doing so, you proved why they chose you instead of me. Eagle's Talon was born from my hatred, but it grew beyond me. There are those who joined for their own reasons, disillusionment, greed, ideology. Even in failure, remember this. The sentiments that drove us exist throughout our institutions. The rot goes deeper than you know. The professor made sure of that. Michael stopped, looking up sharply at Martha, who had gone very still. The professor? Catherine asked. Michael continued, reading, his voice tighter now. You won't find him, Michael. Smarter than both of us. Always was. While I built the muscle, he built the skeleton, the infrastructure, the long-term strategy. He knows you now, knows Catherine, knows Martha. Be careful. We were brothers once. In another life, perhaps we still would be. Goodbye, Michael. James. Michael carefully refolded the letter, his hands steady despite the emotional turmoil within. The final piece of the puzzle had just revealed a new mystery. He loved Mom, Catherine said softly, breaking the silence. It doesn't excuse what he did, Martha pointed out. Millions of people experience unrequited love without turning to murder and terrorism. No, Michael agreed. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. He tapped the letter. This professor, though that's a complication I wasn't expecting. A co-founder of Eagle's Talon, Catherine mused. Someone with access, with intelligence background. Someone who could have helped James acquire a nuclear device, Martha added. Someone still out there. Michael shook his head. Not today. Today we process what we've learned. Tomorrow we start looking into this professor, if he exists at all. James might have been lying, trying to keep us looking over our shoulders. Psychological warfare to the end, Martha agreed. They left Langley together, emerging into the bright Virginia sunshine. Catherine's government vehicle waited to take them back to Charlottesville, where Michael's safe house offered temporary sanctuary, while Mason's diner and the surrounding area remained an active investigation site. The drive was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The adrenaline that had sustained them through the crisis was long gone, leaving in its wake the bone-deep exhaustion that follows extended danger. At the safe house, Catherine insisted on checking Michael's bandages, her touch professional, but with a gentleness that hadn't been there before. Martha prepared a simple meal from the supplies they had brought in. The domesticity of the scene struck Michael as surreal after the intensity of the past week. 6 months, Catherine said suddenly, setting aside the medical supplies. I'm taking 6 months' leave, starting today. Michael looked at his daughter, genuinely surprised. 6 months? You've never taken more than 2 weeks off since you joined Delta Force. I've never helped stop a nuclear terrorist plot masterminded by my godfather before, she countered, a hint of her mother's dry humor surfacing. Besides, Major Chen is more than capable of handling things in my absence. What will you do? Martha asked, setting plates on the small dining table. Catherine hesitated, then looked directly at her father. "I thought I might help rebuild Mason's Diner, learn about running a small business, maybe even figure out how to cook something besides MREs." The implied invitation hung in the air between them. Michael found himself speechless, caught between hope and the habit of emotional distance that had defined their relationship for 15 years. Martha stepped into the silence. "Rebuilding the diner is a wonderful idea. I've been thinking it's time for some updates anyway. Maybe expand the menu, add outdoor seating for summer." "You're staying in town?" Michael asked, finding his voice. "Someone has to keep an eye on you, Harringtons," Martha replied, her tone light, but her eyes serious. "Besides, I've built a life there. It's home." The three of them ate dinner together, conversation gradually shifting from the immediate crisis to more ordinary topics. Catherine shared stories from her time at West Point that Michael had never heard. Martha recalled her early days with the NSA during the Cold War, carefully edited but still revealing. Michael found himself talking about Eleanor, not her death, but her life memories he had kept locked away for too long. It was the most normal evening they had shared in 15 years, perhaps ever. The shadow of Eagle's Talon and James Donovan still loomed, but it no longer dominated the horizon. After dinner, Catherine announced she was turning in early. The exhaustion of the past days had finally caught up with her. She paused at the hallway, looking back at her father. "I meant what I said, Dad. About staying. About helping rebuild." Michael nodded, emotion making speech difficult. "I'd like that, Katie." When she had gone, Martha joined Michael on the small porch, overlooking the darkening countryside. They sat in comfortable silence, two old soldiers watching the stars emerge. "She's giving you a second chance," Martha said finally. "Don't waste it." "I don't intend to." Michael glanced at his oldest friend. "What about you, Martha? What does life after Eagle's Talon look like?" Martha considered the question, looking out at the night. "I've been living half in the shadows for so long, I'm not sure I remember what normal looks like." She smiled slightly. "But I'm willing to find out." The comfortable silence returned, broken only by the sounds of the Virginia night crickets, a distant owl, the rustle of wind through pine trees. Martha's hand found his on the armrest between their chairs, a gesture of companionship that held the possibility of something more. "James was wrong about one thing," Michael said quietly. "In his letter, he said he took Eleanor from me. But he didn't. Not really." He squeezed Martha's hand gently. "What we had, who she was, that lives on in Catherine, in memories, in the choices I make every day. He couldn't take that away, no matter how hard he tried." Martha's eyes reflected starlight as she looked at him. "That's why you won, Michael. Not just this week, but every day for the past 15 years, because you carried her with you instead of letting grief consume you." "I wasn't always successful," he admitted. "None of us are. That's what makes us human." Later, lying in bed but unable to sleep, Michael found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years. Not just the next mission, the next lead to follow, but actual possibilities stretching out before him. Catherine staying in town. Martha's presence in his life evolving into something deeper. The diner rebuilt perhaps with his name alongside hers on the sign. A second chance indeed. But underneath it all, a whisper of caution. The professor. A loose end in an otherwise neatly tied package. Someone who knew them, who might be watching even now. James's final attempt to keep Michael vigilant, or a genuine threat still lurking in the shadows, Michael pushed the thought aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight was for rest. 2 weeks later, Michael stood in the empty shell of Mason's diner, surveying the damage from the FBI search that had followed the Eagle's Talon incident. The authorities had been thorough, removing floorboards and wall panels in their search for additional evidence or devices. The booths, where he had spent so many solitary Tuesday mornings, were gone. The counter dismantled the vintage jukebox taken for examination. But the bones of the place remained. The structure was sound, the foundation uncompromised. Like him, it had weathered the storm. The bell above the door jingled, and Catherine entered, followed by Martha. Both women wore jeans and work shirts, ready for the renovation efforts they had planned for the day. "Contractor's coming at noon," Catherine reported. "He's bringing the new plans for approval." "And I've been in touch with the insurance company," Martha added. "They're processing the claim as a priority given the circumstances." Michael nodded, still taking in the emptiness of the space that had been his sanctuary for so long. "It's strange. I spent 15 years sitting in that corner booth, looking at the door, waiting for answers. Now that I have them, I'm not sure what to do next." "That's the thing about answers," Martha said, moving to stand beside him. "They're never the end of the story, just the beginning of a new chapter." Catherine approached from his other side. "Mom would want us to move forward, Dad. To build something new." "Yes," Michael agreed, feeling the rightness of it settling into his bones. "She would." The three of them stood together, looking around the empty space that would soon be filled again with life, with community, with possibility. The contractor arrived promptly at noon, spreading blueprints across a makeshift table. Michael, Catherine, and Martha gathered around, offering suggestions, debating options, making decisions together. The new design would honor the diner's history while embracing its future: expanded seating, updated kitchen, but keeping the classic character that had made it a town landmark. "What about this area?" the contractor asked, pointing to a space near the front entrance. "A memorial wall." Michael decided the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Photos of local veterans, community members we've lost over the years. A way of honoring the past without being trapped by it." Catherine nodded approval. "Mom's picture should be there." "Center place," Martha agreed. As the contractor left with the finalized plans promising to start work the following Monday, Sheriff Tom Bradley arrived. He had been deeply involved in the investigation, his small town suddenly thrust into the national security spotlight. "Just got word from the feds," he announced. "They're releasing the crime scene tomorrow. You'll be able to start cleanup officially." He surveyed the stripped interior. "Got a message for you too, Michael. Some professor at UVA called the station asking about you. Said he was an old friend, wanted to catch up. Didn't leave a name, just a number." Michael and Martha exchanged sharp glances. "You want the number?" Bradley asked, reaching for his notebook. "No," Michael said carefully. "If he calls again, tell him I've moved. Out west, maybe." Bradley raised an eyebrow, but didn't question further. "Town's buzzing about the reopening. Everyone's asking when you'll be back in business." 3 months, Martha said, recovering her composure, just in time for summer. "Martha and Harrington's," Catherine added, catching Martha's surprised look. "That's what the new sign should say." Martha's eyes found Michael's a question in them. He nodded, smiling. "Has a nice ring to it." Sheriff Bradley looked between them, a knowing expression crossing his weathered face. "About time, you two." To Catherine, he added, "Your mother would approve, you know. She always said these two were meant for each other, even back when your dad was too stubborn to see it." After the sheriff left, Catherine excused herself to make some calls regarding permits. Michael and Martha stepped outside, standing in the spring sunshine, on the spot where the diner's outdoor seating would soon be constructed. "The professor," Martha said quietly. "James wasn't lying." "Apparently not." Michael scanned the street, the old instincts kicking in. We'll need to be careful. Should we tell Catherine? Michael considered this. Not yet. Let her have this time of peace. We'll deal with the professor when, if he makes a move. Martha nodded, accepting his decision. And us, Michael, what about us? He turned to face her, looking at the woman who had been his friend for decades, who had saved his life more than once, who had stood by him through his darkest days. I think, he said slowly, that it's past time I stopped living in the shadow of what I've lost and started embracing what I still have. He took her hand, an echo of their moment on the porch. What I could have, if I'm brave enough to reach for it. Martha's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Michael Harrington, are you finally asking me on a date after 30 years? I believe I am, he confirmed, returning her smile. Though given recent events, perhaps we should start with coffee right here once we have the place up and running again. I accept, Martha said, squeezing his hand. But I'm not waiting 3 months. She leaned forward and kissed him gently, a promise of things to come. Catherine found them like that a moment later, standing hand in hand in the spring sunshine. She cleared her throat, and they turned neither embarrassed nor apologetic. I got hold of the permits office, she reported, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. We're cleared to begin demolition tomorrow. Good work, Michael said, then hesitated before adding, Your mother would be proud of you, Kate, of the woman you've become, the leader, the daughter. Catherine's composure slipped, slightly, emotion washing across her face. I've missed you, Dad. Even when you were right there in front of me, every day, I missed you. I know. Michael opened his arms, and his daughter stepped into them, allowing herself to be held for the first time in years. I'm here now, really here. The moment stretched between them, years of distance bridged by simple human contact. When they finally separated, both had tears in their eyes, but neither felt the need to hide them. I was thinking, Catherine said, composing herself. While the diner is being rebuilt, we should visit Arlington. Mom's grave. It's been too long since I've been there. Michael nodded. I'd like that. He glanced at Martha. Would you come with us? Of course, Martha said. Eleanor was my friend too. She'd want to know we're all taking care of each other now. Arlington National Cemetery was beautiful in the spring sunshine, the endless rows of white headstones stretching across manicured lawns. Michael had visited regularly during the first years after Eleanor's death, less frequently as his search for answers consumed him. Now he returned with new perspective, new understanding. Eleanor's grave was in Section 60, among other military spouses. The headstone was simple, elegant, Eleanor Grace Harrington, beloved wife and mother, her light lives on. Michael knelt beside it, placing a bouquet of yellow roses, her favorite, against the white stone. Catherine joined him, adding her own flowers. Martha stood respectfully nearby, giving father and daughter space for their private grief. We found him, Ellie, Michael said softly. We know the truth now. Catherine rested her hand on his shoulder. Mom, I spent 15 years angry, disconnected. I became what you never wanted me to be, a soldier. But I think you'd understand. I think you'd be proud of how we're finding our way back to each other. I need to tell you something, Katie, Michael said, his voice low, something I should have told you years ago. Catherine looked at him, waiting. Your mother knew about the promotion before I did. She was the one who insisted I take it, even though I was ready to retire. Michael traced the letters of Eleanor's name on the headstone. She believed in service, in duty. She said I had more to give. He took a deep breath. If I had retired when I wanted to, she'd still be alive. Dad, no. Catherine's voice was fierce. James made his choice. You can't carry that. I've carried it for 15 years, Michael admitted. The guilt, the what-ifs. It's why I couldn't let it go, couldn't stop searching. And now, Michael looked up at his daughter, seeing Eleanor in her eyes, her determination. Now I think it's time to honor her by living, not just surviving. They remained there for some time. The spring breeze rustling through nearby cherry trees, scattering blossoms across the immaculate grounds. Life continuing beauty persisting even in a place dedicated to honoring the dead. When they finally rose to leave, Michael felt lighter somehow. Not unburdened, he would always carry Eleanor with him, but able to bear the weight with greater ease. Martha was waiting for them at a respectful distance. As they approached, she offered a sympathetic smile. She was extraordinary, your Eleanor. The kind of person who made everyone around her better, just by being herself. Yes, Michael agreed. She was. He took Martha's hand, a gesture that felt increasingly natural. She would approve of this, you know. Of us, she always said life was for the living. Catherine nodded agreement. Mom never held on to bitterness. She wouldn't want us to either. They walked back toward the cemetery entrance together, the three of them connected now by more than just the crisis they had weathered. By choice, by shared purpose, by the slow healing of old wounds. As they reached the car, Michael paused, scanning the grounds with old instincts that never truly faded. At the edge of his vision, near a stand of trees, he caught a glimpse of an older man with silver hair and glasses watching them. When Michael turned for a better look, the figure was gone. "Dad?" Catherine asked. "Everything okay?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Everything's fine." The drive back to Virginia was quieter, each of them processing the emotional weight of the day. But the silence was comfortable, unforced. The silence of people who understood one another well enough that constant conversation wasn't necessary. 3 months later, the morning of the grand reopening dawned clear and perfect. Martha and Harrington's diner stood transformed, the exterior freshly painted, the new sign gleaming in the morning sun, the interior ready to welcome the community back through its doors. Michael stood on the sidewalk out front, taking in the results of their labor. The American flag flew from a new pole beside the entrance, honoring the military heritage that connected so many in their small town. Through the windows, he could see Catherine and Martha making final preparations, moving with the easy coordination of people who had learned to work together as a team. Sheriff Bradley joined him, coffee in hand. "Quite a transformation," he observed. "You three have accomplished something special here." "We had help," Michael acknowledged, thinking of the many townspeople who had contributed time, skills, and support to the project. "Community comes together when it matters," Bradley said. "Though I have to admit it's going to take some getting used to calling it Martha and Harrington's instead of Mason's." "Change is part of life," Michael said, watching, as Martha laughed at something Catherine had said inside. "Sometimes it's exactly what we need." Bradley sipped his coffee. "By the way, that professor called again, more insistent this time. Said it was important you two connect." Michael's expression didn't change, but a familiar tension returned to his shoulders. "What did you tell him?" "What you asked me to. That you'd moved west. He didn't believe me." Bradley gave Michael a sidelong look. "Old friend is he. Old enemy, more likely." Michael kept his voice casual. "Did he leave a name this time?" "No, but he left a message." Bradley handed Michael a sealed envelope. "Said to give this to you when I saw you next." Michael took the envelope, feeling its weight. "Thanks, Tom." "You in some kind of trouble I should know about?" the sheriff asked, concern evident in his voice. "Not yet," Michael assured him. Just ghosts from the past. The official opening was scheduled for 7 a.m., but already a small crowd had gathered. Regular customers eager to reclaim their usual tables, local business owners showing support for one of their own. Veterans who had shared countless cups of coffee with Michael over the years, discussing wars past and present. Michael tucked the envelope into his pocket. It would wait. Today was for celebration, not shadows. At precisely 7 a.m., Michael, Martha, and Catherine stood together at the entrance. Martha held the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the doorway, Catherine held the scissors, and Michael addressed the gathered crowd. 15 years ago, I started coming to this diner every Tuesday morning, he began. I was looking for something then, Answers Peace Connection. I didn't find what I was looking for, but I found something else. Community. Belonging. A place where a broken old soldier could sit with his coffee and his memories and feel for a few hours that he wasn't alone. He looked at Martha, then at Catherine. I'm not that man anymore. Thanks to these two extraordinary women, thanks to all of you, I've found my way back to the land of the living. This diner is more than just a business to us. It's a symbol of resilience, of new beginnings, of the truth, that even after the darkest night, dawn still comes. Catherine stepped forward with the scissors. Martha and Harrington's Diner is officially open for business. The ribbon fell and applause erupted from the crowd. People streamed inside, exclaiming over the renovations, claiming tables, creating an immediate atmosphere of warmth and community. Michael found himself behind the counter pouring coffee alongside Martha, while Catherine managed the dining room. The familiarity of the space, combined with its newness, created a strange sense of déjà vu, as if he were simultaneously in the past and the future. As the morning rush began to ease, Michael took a moment to step outside, needing a breath of fresh air after the hustle and bustle. The spring day was warming nicely, the town fully awake now, going about its business. Martha joined him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Taking a break already? We've only been open 2 hours. Just catching my breath, he assured her. It's a lot to take in. She nodded, understanding. From solitary customer to co-owner. Quite a journey. Worth every step, Michael said, taking her hand. They stood together, watching the town they had protected continuing its peaceful existence, unaware of how close it had come to annihilation. The ordinary magic of everyday life. People going to work, running errands, living their lives, seemed suddenly precious to Michael in a way it hadn't before. He reached into his pocket, feeling the envelope Sheriff Bradley had given him. The professor. A reminder that danger might still lurk beyond today's peace. You're thinking about the envelope, Martha said, not a question. Later, Michael decided letting it remain in his pocket. Whatever it contains, it can wait. Today is ours. Catherine appeared in the doorway. Dad, Martha, you've got customers asking for you. Table 7. Inside, they found Director Freeman seated at a booth, alone, this time an untouched cup of coffee before him. He rose as they approached. Congratulations on the opening, he said, shaking Michael's hand, then Martha's. Quite a transformation. Thank you, Lawrence, Michael said, sensing this wasn't merely a social call. What brings the Director of National Intelligence to our little corner of Virginia? Freeman waited until they were seated across from him, then spoke quietly. 2 things. First, these. He slid 3 small boxes across the table. From the President. Your commendations. Michael opened his box to reveal the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction. Martha's contained the Distinguished Intelligence Medal. The third, for Catherine, held the Distinguished Service Cross. Normally presented at a ceremony, Freeman said, but given the classified nature of your actions, "We understand," Martha assured him. "Please convey our thanks." "And the second reason for your visit?" Michael asked, sensing there was more. Freeman's expression grew somber. "We've been investigating Eagle's Talon thoroughly. Donovan's network went deeper than we initially estimated." He hesitated. "Several of those we interrogated mentioned another founder, someone called the Professor." Michael and Martha exchanged glances. "Any identification?" Martha asked. "Nothing concrete, but yesterday we found this." Freeman passed a folder across the table. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from surveillance footage. It showed an older man with silver hair and glasses walking through what appeared to be an airport terminal. "This was taken at Dulles 3 days ago," Freeman explained. "Facial recognition flagged a 67% match with a former NSA analyst believed dead since 2011, Dr. Alexander Weiss." Michael stiffened. "I knew him. He was in theoretical counterintelligence, brilliant but unstable." "He was James's mentor at the agency," Martha added, studying the photo. "Before my time, but his reputation was legendary." Freeman nodded. "We believe he may be attempting to reconstitute elements of Eagle's Talon, and the latest intelligence suggests he may have been watching you." He glanced around the busy diner. "All of you." "The phone calls to the sheriff," Michael said, reaching for the envelope in his pocket. "The man at Arlington." "We've increased surveillance on this location," Freeman assured them. "Discreetly, of course, but I wanted to warn you personally." "We appreciate it, Lawrence," Michael said, sliding the unopened envelope across the table. "You might want to have your people look at this. The professor left it for me with the sheriff." Freeman took the envelope carefully. "I'll have it analyzed immediately." After he left, Michael and Martha returned to work, neither mentioning the professor to Catherine. There would be time for that conversation later. Today was for celebration, not fear. The day passed in a blur of activity, customers coming and going, the reborn diner quickly settling into its new rhythm. By closing time, they were exhausted but deeply satisfied. As Michael locked the front door, flipping the sign to "Closed," he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass. Not the grim, haunted man who had come to Mason's Diner every Tuesday for 15 years, searching for answers that might never come. Instead, he saw someone renewed, someone with purpose, beyond vengeance. Behind him, reflected in the same glass, Martha and Catherine cleared tables, laughing together about something. His new family formed from the ashes of loss. The professor was out there somewhere. A threat for tomorrow, perhaps. But Michael Harrington had faced threats before, had survived, had endured. And this time, he wouldn't face the danger alone. He turned from the door, joining Martha and Catherine at the counter. Together, they counted the day's receipts, planned tomorrow's specials, lived in the moment, instead of the past or the uncertain future. For the first time in 15 years, Michael Harrington felt completely at peace. The ghosts were finally quiet, and the living had reclaimed their rightful place in his heart. Whatever came next, they would face it together.